My wife called me in a panic that Friday morning, asking me to come home. I left the family business my father had entrusted to me and my brother and rushed home, sensing something serious. Sarah, a stay-at-home mom, never disturbed me at work unless it was urgent. I worried something had happened to one of our teenage daughters at school, perhaps a sports injury, as they were both very athletic. My daughters meant the world to me, both growing into beautiful young women like their mother. We ran the largest electrical company in the state. I handled the commercial side, while my brother, Mark, managed residential. Over the past 6 years, we had tripled our volume, making our mother proud. Last year, we netted $5 million for the first time in the company's 50-year history. Since our father passed away, we had turned the business into a highly successful enterprise, now valued at $20 million. My mother, still the majority shareholder with 52%, had made Mark the president, while my brother and I each owned 24%. After my father's death, my mother also entrusted me with her personal investments, which I aggressively managed with her broker, yielding impressive results. When I arrived home, I saw movers packing our belongings. Sarah, standing by her new car, the one I had bought her, calmly informed me she was leaving for good. Our daughters had already moved out without my knowledge. She handed me divorce papers, stating that she had fallen out of love and was with someone else. Without further explanation or any chance to discuss it, she left, ending our 17-year marriage abruptly and coldly. I initially suspected she had met someone online but quickly realized it was someone local. When I asked the movers for the delivery address, I was shocked to recognize it. I tipped the driver, asked him to lock up, and made a stop to verify the address. What I found shattered my life. Sarah had left me for someone we both knew well. The betrayal was devastating, made worse by who she had chosen. Sarah's brother, Paul, and I had been inseparable during our youth, though we had drifted apart as we grew older. Paul, now a Marine, had remained a good friend, upholding the morals and principles of his upbringing. While my father's business was booming, I spent most of my spare time helping out. Sometimes, I'd receive stock for upcoming jobs. I once asked my father why he hadn't used his own name for the business. He replied, "Harris & Sons is overused and often fails. Adler, your mother's maiden name, adds a sense of permanence and pride." My older brother, Mark, 3 years my senior, often took me along when delivering materials. He got paid, but I used the time to learn. After 10th grade, I started an apprenticeship to earn my electrical license while continuing my education online. I graduated high school before finishing my apprenticeship and began a business management degree, which helped us grow the company. Mark learned the business by working every job and picked up some bad habits along the way. I started bidding on small commercial contracts, completing them under budget and saving customers money. Word-of-mouth growth exceeded our expectations. My father used to say, "You're the brain of the company, and Mark's the brawn. Both are essential for success." At 20, living on my own, Mark called me one night, drunk and needing a ride from a wild party. I went to get him and found Sarah there, also needing a ride. Her father was strict, and she was terrified of his reaction if she didn't get home on time. Sarah, at 17, had grown into a stunning young woman with mesmerizing green eyes and an unforgettable smile. I agreed to drive her home. Her father was relieved to see me instead of her date, saying, "Sarah, you should have told me Caleb was your date." A week later, Sarah showed up at my father's shop, asking me to take her to her senior prom. I agreed, after getting her father's permission. That night, we decided to make it official, marking the beginning of our relationship. Now, 17 years later, it was ending. 20 minutes later, I arrived at the office, furious and determined. I went straight to Mark's office. His door was locked, and his receptionist, Anna, glanced at me uneasily. "Anna," I said curtly, "I need you to come with me. I need a witness for this conversation." She hesitated but nodded. "Of course." I kicked the door open and barged in. Mark looked up, startled, and quickly ended his call. "What's going on?" he asked, his tone defensive. "You need to get this business appraised and buy my shares out by the time my divorce is finalized. Do you understand me, Mark?" I said coldly. Anna stood frozen behind me, her eyes wide. "What are you talking about?" Mark asked, his voice shaking slightly. "The movers gave me Sarah's new address. I went there. I saw my daughters." "Don't lie to me," I snapped. "She's just staying with me temporarily, until she finds a place," Mark said, his tone growing colder. "That's not what she told me," I replied, my voice sharp with anger. "She said she's moving in with the man she loves. She handed me divorce papers, Mark." Mark turned pale, speechless. Anna's expression shifted from confusion to horror as she realized the truth. "How long has this been going on?" I demanded. "Were those afternoons I covered for you just so you could sneak around with her? God, I should get tested for STDs, knowing your history." Mark's face turned an even deeper shade of white. He stammered, "This isn't the time or place to talk about this." He said quietly, "Screw you. There will never be a right time for this. Go to the bank or put the business up for sale. We're done, as partners and brothers. Caleb, there must be another way. We need you," Mark pleaded. "We can talk when you're calmer." In pure anger, I picked up his desk phone and called our mother, putting it on speaker. "Mom, I have bad news," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of fury and betrayal. "Today is my last day. I'm resigning effective immediately. Mark needs to buy out my shares." "What?" she said, shocked. "You love that business. What happened?" "Ask Mark," I replied. "He's not in his office because his secret lover is moving in today. They're getting married after her divorce. You might want to visit and meet her." I hung up. Mark was furious but couldn't find the words to respond. He had been bragging about his new love for months at family dinners, never revealing who she was. "Mary," I said, addressing his assistant, "follow me to my office to ensure I don't take anything belonging to the company. I want a signed statement that I turned over all keys and only took personal items." Mark's expression darkened as I openly displayed my distrust. Before leaving, I turned to him and said, "Should I walk out backwards so you can't stab me in the back again? What you and Sarah did is worse than if you had just shot me." We walked back to my office, where my receptionist, Claire, was working. "Claire, please come in and witness what's about to happen," I said. "Mary will appreciate having another witness." "Caleb, what's going on?" Claire asked, alarmed. "I've quit because Mark has stolen my wife and children," I replied. "I was called home to be served with divorce papers. The movers gave me Sarah's new address, which turned out to be Mark's." Both Claire and Mary froze in shock. These wonderful ladies had been our backbone for years, and I deeply respected them. "Let's list everything Caleb takes and the keys he gives us," Mary suggested. "We'll type it up, witness it, and make 5 copies. Claire and I will each take a copy home for safekeeping." Her suggestion showed their loyalty to the company president, but it also made me wonder what else Mark had been hiding. It took about an hour to complete. I called security to escort me out and verify the items I was taking. I watched as Claire and Mary placed the extra copies in their purses. Mark had rushed out without saying goodbye, hoping to avoid the scene. Everyone saw the 2 top executive assistants escorting me out with tears in their eyes. I kissed them on the cheek and thanked them for their years of support. I stepped outside, took the single box from the security officer, and left. As soon as I drove off, I stopped by a real estate office and listed the house. I gave the representative my wife's cell number, telling them she would need to sign off. I told her my soon-to-be ex would decide the listing price. At home, I noticed only their personal belongings and our daughter's bedroom furniture were gone. I turned off my phone, poured myself a stiff drink, and tried to distract myself with TV. All I could find were outdated reruns. I must have passed out because I woke up with a pounding headache on the living room sofa. After a shower and a shave, I ate breakfast and started my usual Saturday chores. Around 1 p.m., I turned my phone back on. There were messages from my mother, Mark, Sarah, and my daughters. The only message I trusted was from my mother, the rest didn't matter to me. I listened to the messages and deleted them one by one. Sarah's message said, "We can reach an agreement once you calm down." Then the real estate agent called. "Mr. Harris, your wife finally showed up this morning, but she was not happy," Ms. Waterston said. "She was shocked that you're including the furniture with the house. After seeing comparable homes, she agreed to add $20,000 for the furniture." "Thank you for the update," I replied. "I want it sold quickly because it holds too many memories." "She broke down," Ms. Waterston continued. "She wasn't expecting you to go through with this." "What did she expect?" I asked bitterly. "She left me for my brother." "She seemed surprised you're demanding to be bought out from the family company," Ms. Waterston added. "I just want to get away from them," I said. "In the divorce, she's trying to take the kids completely from me." "She seemed shocked," Ms. Waterston replied gently. "I told her she might fool others, but I know how people like her think." "Miss Waterston, I've arranged for a good divorce lawyer, I'll text you her details," I said. I thanked her and hung up. Just then, I saw my sister Connie's car pull into the driveway. I finished making my coffee and went to let her in. "It must be important for you to drive halfway across the state," I said. "Mom was devastated when she found Sarah and your daughters at Mark's place," Connie said. "She couldn't believe it." "How long has it been going on?" I asked. "Mom found out from Sarah that it's been about 2 years," Connie replied. "How could I have been so blind?" I said, shaking my head. "Before we talk more, read the divorce papers." "I'll get you some coffee." Connie sat down and read the papers carefully. "These claims are so exaggerated," she said, her face growing angrier. "Sarah wants you out of your daughters' lives entirely. Most of this is nonsense." "Mom doesn't want me leaving the family business," I said bitterly. "So Mom wants me to accept being Mark's cuck and cash cow?" Connie's eyes widened in shock. "Oh my God," she swore, surprising me. Connie never used foul language. "How do I explain this to Mom?" Connie asked. "She won't understand the full betrayal. Mom might see the infidelity and the breakup, but not why I'm leaving the company," I said. "I can't stay, knowing Mark turned my wife and children against me just to keep Mom's approval. Your husband makes business deals. He could find a buyer for the company," Connie said. "Mark has left you no choice. You have to write him out of your life. He knew what he was doing, and it was deliberate." Connie called her husband and explained everything. When she hung up, she said, "He'll have a team appraise the company on Monday. I need to convince Mom it's the best solution." I pulled out the last 5 years of financial records and handed them to her. "Your husband will need these," I said. "What about Bea and Bree?" Connie asked, referring to my daughters. "That's up to Judge Donald McDonald," I said. "I wanted Dale Britton, but he's tied up with a big case. Her lawyer is painting an ugly picture of me." Connie and I talked briefly before she left to speak with our mother. That night, I couldn't sleep. I missed having Sarah beside me, even though I hated her for what she'd done. The next morning, I decided to leave town for a few days after meeting with my lawyer, hoping the space would help me think clearly. Connie called later that afternoon. "Mom and I spoke with the pastor," she said. "He said, the one who's been injured the most may never get over it. What they did to him was despicable, but it's common today. Love and decency have lost their value, they're just tools to manipulate and control others. Mom was shocked, and the pastor said you're not the first to be destroyed by family and won't be the last, Connie added. But she agreed to sell the business. Not because of what Mark did, but because she knows Mark would ruin it without you. She wants to know who should take your place, Connie said. Does she understand I consider Mark dead to me? I asked. Yes. And why? Connie replied. I had to explain what being a cuck means. Mom swore she'd liquidate Sarah if she saw her again. Tell Mom to appoint Carl Robertson as president, I said. He knows everything I do and can prevent Mark from overriding him. That's essential for getting the best price for the company. If Mom can't do it, she should appoint you as CEO until the company is sold. I must stay out of it to avoid it being used against me in divorce court. Connie agreed to check with her husband. Later, she texted me, I'm the new CEO. I'll implement your suggestions tomorrow. I was having brunch when Sarah called. This time, I answered. Can we talk? Sarah asked. No. If you or Mark contact me again, I'll file mistreatment charges. Everything will be settled in court, I said. We need to discuss Bea and Bree, Sarah insisted. There's no reason for you to leave the family business. We can work this out. We'll sort this out in court, I interrupted. I'm requesting paternity tests to determine if they are Mark's or mine. We all deserve the truth, and I'll never return to anything involving the family. Sarah gasped. They're yours, and you know it. I thought I had a loving wife until Friday. I was wrong about that. So I must consider I might not be their father either. Mark could have been deceiving me for years, I said. Sarah started crying, but I hung up. I called my former assistant Claire for advice from her husband, David, who had gone through a tough divorce. David arrived, read the divorce petition, and listened as I explained everything. Let's be clear, David said. You don't know when the affair started, other than hearsay. Yes, that's true, I admitted. In court, you'd be justified in requesting paternity tests due to the family situation, David said. The way you found out implies long-term deception. Judge Donald MacDonald will need biological proof before making any rulings. Is the judge that strict? I asked. Yes. My divorce took 6 months, but his rulings prioritized our children's needs. It was tough, but ultimately, he made the right decisions, David explained. I offered David a drink, and we were chatting about his relationship with Claire when a truck pulled into my driveway. I looked out the window and froze. It was Mark. That man dares to show up here after what he did. I said, my voice low and cold. I wish I had one of Dad's .22s. David said, sit down. I'll handle this. If he won't leave, I'll show him my badge. He doesn't want to deal with the Cape Girardeau police. He opened the front door and lowered the screen window so I could hear the conversation. Mark slammed his truck door and yelled, "Where's my stupid brother?" I told him we could work it out, but he wouldn't listen. Now he has to, because I need to straighten him out. If he won't listen, I'll shove my fist down his throat. No, David said firmly. Go home and cool down before you do something you'll regret. Screw you. Get out of my way. I left Sarah in tears because he's questioning the paternity of the girls. He needs to be straightened out, and I'm the one to do it. So, when did the affair start? David asked calmly. 5 years ago, if it's any of your business, Mark snapped. Interesting, because Sarah told your mother yesterday it was 2 years ago, David replied, showing his badge. I have to wonder what the truth is, since both of you are making the other look like a liar. Mark turned white as David continued, after making Caleb an unknowing cuck, you expected him to just accept it and carry on like nothing happened. Was your plan to break him and make him your submissive lapdog? What gives you the right to think your brother should bow to you? Mark was stunned into silence, revealing they hadn't thought this through. David pressed on. I wonder what the judge will say about this recorded conversation. I suggest you get back in your truck and start preparing Sarah for the paternity tests. Your story lacks credibility, and any further explanations will be seen as more lies. I watched from the kitchen window as Mark walked back to his truck, his shoulders slumped. Things were clearly not going as he had planned. David waited until Mark drove away before coming back inside. What's your lawyer's name? He asked. I'll contact her on Monday and send a copy of this recording. I gave him the details. Why did you bring your police cam? I asked. It's standard in domestic situations, David explained. When Claire told me why you needed to talk, I knew anything could happen, so I came prepared. Let Claire know I'm leaving town after seeing the lawyer, I said. It's best I stay away for a while. Is it anything the cops might be called about? David asked. Our older sister, Connie, is now the CEO of the family company. Tomorrow, she'll appoint Carl Robertson as president. My brother will be demoted to vice president, I explained. This is happening because... David asked. Mom doesn't want my brother destroying what my father and I built before she finds a buyer, I said. I agree with your reasoning, David said. You should be packed to leave right after your lawyer's appointment. Mark will see it as all you're doing. From what I've learned, he's hot-headed and reacts without thinking. He could do anything. After David left, I cleaned up the kitchen and went to Ace Hardware to buy a new lock set for all the doors. It took me 2 hours to install them. I was about to change the house's security system code when my phone rang. It was Sarah's father. What's going on, Caleb? Sarah's father asked. My granddaughters have been calling from an unknown number because Sarah confiscated their phones, and yours is never on. Did you ask Sarah why? I replied. She says it's personal and they'll explain later. Katie and I want answers now, he said. Sarah moved out on Friday, I said. She called me home as the movers finished and served me with divorce papers. She said she's in love with another man, and that his name doesn't matter. Are you serious? He asked quietly. Yes. The movers gave me her new address because Sarah wouldn't. She moved in with my older brother. They've been in a relationship for 2 to 5 years, depending on who you ask. She doesn't want me to have any contact with Bea and Bree and is asking for 1 hour a month of supervised visits. Why would she do that? You've been a great father, he said. She probably doubts I'm their biological father, I said. My lawyer will request DNA tests to confirm. Also, I'm no longer involved in the family business. It sounds like she knows who their real father is, he replied. What should I tell my granddaughters? He asked. Tell them the truth, which they haven't been getting from their mother, I said. After we said goodbye, I reset all the codes. Then I went to Golden Corral for a quick bite. I had just left the lawyer's office at 11 a.m. She agreed the situation was a mess but believed the video David sent would undermine the plaintiff's credibility. She thought their stupidity had put me in the driver's seat. I had cancelled all of Sarah's debit and credit cards and removed her from all bank accounts. My next stop was the real estate office to give them the new house key and access code. Then I hit the road heading south. About an hour later, Claire called. Just checking, you're on the road, she asked. Connie just walked in to meet Carl Robertson. I left about an hour ago after dropping off the keys, I said. Heading south with no particular destination. We'll call to update you, Claire said. Text me first so I can pull over, I replied. I stopped at a rest area and finally let my emotions out. After a while, a police cruiser pulled in. The officer got out and approached me. I saw you pull in 2 hours ago and got concerned, he said. I've been through a lot emotionally and decided not to drive, I said. I explained to the officer that I was going through a divorce. He smiled knowingly. The road south with no destination, that's a common choice, he said, handing me a cold soda from his cooler. We chatted for a while until a text message came in. Need privacy? He asked. No, you might find this interesting, I said, putting the call on speaker. How did it go, Joanne? Carl accepted the president position temporarily, knowing it was your suggestion, Joanne said. He and Connie informed Mark of his removal. Mark didn't take it well and refused the vice president position. Carl told him, I guess you've decided to quit. Let me call security to escort you out. Mark cursed and blamed you for everything. So my brother is unemployed, like me, I said with a chuckle. That must hurt his pride. Off the record, Caleb, I think that was Connie and your mother's plan all along, Joanne said. Expect a call from Connie shortly. The officer saw me smile as I began to explain. My wife of 17 years left me for my brother last Friday. I resigned as vice president of the family business and demanded they buy out my shares. They didn't see it coming. I had just finished explaining when Connie called. I put her on speaker. When can you get back here? Connie asked. Why? It sounds like you have everything under control, I said. Carl is perfect for the job. My husband lined up financing so you can buy Mark's shares. Mom wants him out. Carl agreed to stay on as vice president if you return as president. Fine, I said after a pause. I'll meet you at Mom's around 6 tonight. Tell Joanne to order new office furniture and repaint the offices. If she gets it right, I'll give her a 10% raise. We said goodbye, and I smiled. What's the name of your company? The officer asked. Parish Electrical. We're in about a third of the state and always expanding, I replied. Your logo is, no job is too big or too small. That's right. It was my dad's favorite saying, I said with a touch of pride. We talked a bit more before he handed me his business card and directions to reverse my route. I appreciated his kindness as he followed me out. Back in town, I noted his card's details before heading to my parents' place around 5:30. My mother met me at the door, and we shared a quiet moment. Connie was at the airport picking up her husband. Mom and I chatted until my phone rang. It was Sarah's father. Hi, Dad. What's up? I answered. Have you heard rumors about your brother in the workyards? He asked. Let me step out before I answer, I said. Once outside, I continued, yes, but I've seen no proof. Why? He has illegal videos on his home computer. Bea and Bree found them and called us. They're scared to be near him. We picked them up from school, but I don't know what to do. Call Joanne. Explain the situation and say you're giving the kids sanctuary. Use a throwaway phone to avoid detection, I advised. Why call Joanne? Her husband's a cop. He'll handle it, I said. Thanks for helping my granddaughters, he replied. Text me your number, I said. After ending the call, I texted the number to my mother-in-law's phone before clearing my messages. David arrived soon after. Good to see you. What's up? I asked. Your daughters are missing, and your phone was busy. Sarah filed a kidnapping complaint against you, David said. I glanced at my concerned mother. When did they disappear? After school, around 2:30, David replied. I handed him the state trooper's card. Call him, you'll understand. David called, and my mother saw his relieved smile as the call ended. I should have known, David said. You have the perfect alibi. You were an hour away, sharing a soda with another officer when your daughters disappeared. David then received 5 text messages in a row and stepped outside to make a call. When he returned, he asked to speak with me privately. What do you know about the rumors about your brother? He asked. People say he likes them younger than he should, I said. I always kept my girlfriends away from him because I had suspicions. Why? Your daughters found something disturbing on his computer, David said. They told someone at school and are now in sanctuary while we investigate. I sat down, my head in my hands. When I reconnected with Sarah at 17, she ran with a wild crowd. I picked up my drunk brother that night, and she asked for a ride home. I wonder if Mark was her date, I said bitterly. David whispered, tell your daughter's protectors we won't charge them. I need a few days to resolve this. Your mistake was giving them my wife's number, he added. It's Beth's parents. I had no clue, I said, shaking my head. But I told them to use a disposable phone. David laughed. Be thankful for caring in-laws. I'll get a warrant for your brother's computer and might need your daughters to testify. We returned to the living room, and I escorted the officers to the door. Just as I opened it, Sarah walked in. Are you arresting Caleb for kidnapping? She asked, her voice trembling. No, David said firmly. He has an alibi. He was with a police officer when your kids disappeared. Sarah's face turned white. Maybe the girls ran away because they don't want to live with you, I said coldly. David, should I go home in case they show up? Smart idea, David said. They can decide where they want to live. David grinned as he left and said, call me if they show up. After the officer drove off, I turned to Sarah. Was my brother your date the night I gave you a ride home when he was drunk? Her expression gave her away. I guess I know how long you've been with him, I said quietly. My mother, furious, yelled, Caleb, throw her out now. If I see her again, I'll use one of my husband's rifles. Run, Sarah, I said. She might shoot you now. Sarah fled in fear. I couldn't help but laugh. Well played, Mom. She believed it. Mom asked. I think she did, I replied with a grin. I called Sarah's father. Can you bring Mom and the kids to my mother's for dinner? Are you serious? He asked, surprised. We're celebrating my daughter's return. No more problems with Sarah or the police, I said. We're on our way, he replied. Mom, the girls need to stay here until I can get furniture. Is that okay? Why don't you all move in until the divorce is final? Mom suggested. I'll take them shopping for new clothes tomorrow. Sounds good to me, I said. Make sure they get new cell phones. Sarah took theirs to prevent them from contacting me. Mom informed the kitchen staff about the extra dinner guests. I brought in my suitcases, and Mom showed me to my room. Meanwhile, Sarah was fuming. She was worried sick about her daughters and certain that I had taken them. But her fears weren't just about the kids, they were about the exposure of her relationship with Mark. It turned out Mark had been Sarah's date the night I drove her home. He had taken her purity before she reconnected with me. After our second daughter was born, Mark decided he had to reclaim her. She resisted for a long time, but one Wednesday afternoon while I was on a business trip, Mark showed up at our house. He took her in his arms, kissed her, and soon they were in the throes of passion. Mark loudly declared that he was claiming Sarah as his woman. They continued their affair in secret, meeting whenever they could, while pretending everything was normal at family gatherings. After almost being caught by our eldest daughter, Mark convinced Sarah that they should move in together. They assumed I would eventually accept their relationship, but instead, I resigned from the company and questioned the paternity of my daughters. Now, Mark and Sarah were facing the consequences. Mark returned home that afternoon to tell Sarah that Connie had removed him from the company. Their plan had unintentionally destroyed my life, but it had also backfired on them. Later, Sarah called me. I answered on the third ring. Caleb, have you heard anything about the kids? She asked. No, but I don't think you need to worry, I said. Why do you feel that way? She asked, her voice cautious. Because if they're as lucky as you, they'll be picked up by a man like Mark, who will train them to be eager and willing, just like he did to you. Sarah ended the call, and I could only imagine her tears. My words had been cruel, but they reflected how I saw her relationship with Mark. In my eyes, Mark had taken what he wanted without regard for anyone else. At my mother's house, we celebrated with my daughters, Sarah's parents, and Connie. It was a relief after 4 trying days. The girls were thrilled to see Aunt Connie and Uncle Tom. During the meal, we discussed temporary plans until the divorce was finalized. The girls were happy to stay with me and Grandma. Business matters could wait for the next day. After dinner, Sarah's father and I took a walk. "Caleb, how long has my daughter's relationship with your brother been going on?" he asked. "Since the first time I brought her home from a wild party my brother was attending." Sarah admitted that Mark was her date that night, I said. His eyes teared up. "Then why did Sarah start chasing you?" "I believe Mark and Sarah weren't serious back then," I replied. That night, she saw me differently. Our early years of marriage were good, but Mark started desiring what I had and began chasing her. Mark has always been more aggressive. "Your father once told me Mark felt he was always trying to live up to you because your standards were so high," he said. "I never knew that," I admitted. "It's sad that Mark dragged Sarah down with him," he said. "The police will seize his computer this week. If they find what we suspect, Sarah will likely get supervised visitation with her daughters." I nodded solemnly. "It's a terrible situation, but at least my daughters will be safe." "She deserves it," Sarah's dad said firmly. "Some people have to learn the hard way." I arrived late to the office Tuesday morning, having spent the earlier part of the day reconnecting with my daughters. My mother was thrilled to have a girls' day out with her granddaughters, shopping and enjoying their time together. At the office, employees lined up, clapping as I walked in. Carl Robertson, Mary, and Claire shook my hand. I turned to Carl and said, "We'll redo your office after we finish the president's office." That morning, the local newspaper had announced my appointment as president and Carl's promotion to vice president, noting that Mark Tate was no longer with the company. The phone started ringing with new business opportunities, many of them explicitly because Mark was no longer involved. It made me wonder just how much business his presence had cost us over the years. Later, I left the office to pick up the rest of my clothes from my former home, knowing Mom and the girls were still out shopping. While I was loading my car, Mark attacked me from behind. The last time we fought, he had gotten the better of me, but this time I grabbed a tire iron to defend myself. I struck his leg, making him release me. A neighbor called the cops, who arrived to break up the fight and arrest Mark for being the aggressor. In the aftermath, I collapsed and woke up in the hospital with cracked ribs, internal bleeding, and bruises all over my body. My mother sat beside me, shaking her head. "You look like a character from Soylent Green," she said, trying to lighten the mood. Mark was charged with aggravated assault. My daughters, Bea and Bree, were deeply upset by my condition and everything that had happened. "What happened to me was because your mother and uncle acted on their emotions without thinking," I told them. "People like that lose their ability to see things clearly, and it makes their situations worse. I'll recover, but they may not." The girls and my mother stayed with me until I fell asleep. The next morning, Connie, Mom, and Tom came to visit. Tom was eager to discuss a new loan and business opportunity. A competitor had filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and Tom suggested we expand north by taking over their contracts and making a low offer on their equipment and buildings. "Why not just by controlling interest in their shares?" I asked. Tom explained, "Their debt is too high, and we'd be stuck with costly union contracts." Mom surprised us by saying, "James has effectively been running the company for years. I want to give him 27% of the shares so he has complete control. We can't count on Mark agreeing to sell, but the rest will go to Connie. Thanks to James's investment skills, I have enough to live comfortably. Does anyone object?" "I do," I said. "I'll agree to this if Tom becomes our CFO." He may take a pay cut, but that's the sacrifice I'm asking for. Connie teared up. Our father had never fully accepted Tom, so my offer meant everything to her. I'll even cover your moving costs and house purchase if you say yes, I added. Tom, flabbergasted, shook my hand. I'd be honored, he said. Mom was thrilled her daughter and son-in-law would be moving back home. After they left, I called Carl to discuss our plans. He mentioned that the assets and contracts we were pursuing had political support. If the court accepts our offer, we'll need to act quickly, I stressed. I was released from the hospital on Friday. Mom picked me up and drove me to my house to pack. Connie was arriving the next morning to house hunt. My body was healing, and my lawyer had secured restraining orders against both Sarah and Mark. Sarah's parents had visited 3 times, and Mom remarked, "It's been a quiet few days." It gave the girls time to adjust. "How are Bea and Bree emotionally?" I asked. "They're handling it better than I would have," Mom said. "But they need some private time with you." "They'll have the whole weekend with me if needed," I said. "I'll stop by the motor vehicle office for Bree's learner permit materials." Tom had already given notice at his firm and completed the company's valuation. He had turned down a huge raise to stay, saying his sign-on bonus with us was a new house. "Tom has the knowledge we need for this growth," I said. "Bringing him into the family business is long overdue." "Why wasn't it done before?" Mom asked. "The previous president wouldn't approve it," I replied. When we arrived at my house, I thanked her and went inside. I found a letter from Sarah in the mail and threw it away. It was too little, too late. How can someone be sorry for deliberate actions? I muttered to myself. I called a cleaning service to remove the leftover food, clean the place, and shut off the water and appliances. I gave them the alarm code and said I'd drop off a key in 2 hours. It took about an hour to pack my clothes and personal items. Before leaving, I shaved and left a mustache and goatee for a new look. David called to inform me that Mark's house had been raided and his computer seized. Mark's lawyer was negotiating a plea deal. Back at Mom's house, my daughters were already home from school. They helped me move and unpack my clothes. Afterward, we lay on the bed and had a long chat. The topic of love came up. When you have lust, it's just about satisfying animalistic needs, I explained. But making love is different, it's about putting the other person first and strengthening the bond. What brought Uncle Mark and Mom together? Bea asked hesitantly. Bea asked, was it love or just physical attraction? Your uncle wanted what I had, I said. He let his desire grow until he acted on it. At first, your mother may have been overwhelmed, but she became attracted to the raw intensity of it. Each encounter reminded them of that first day, pulling them together. Eventually, their desire led to a long-term relationship built on lies and deceit. I worried that I'd made it sound too complicated, but Bree surprised me by saying, basically, they went for what the other was offering without enough morals to walk away. What do you mean? Bea asked, curious. My red dress that you want so much, Bree said. I taunt you with it because I know you want it. That's what Mom and Uncle Mark did, with their physical appearances. Bree left the room and returned with the red dress Bea had been coveting. Handing it to her sister, she said, what I did was wrong, like them, but to a lesser degree. I'm sorry, sis. The dress is yours. I got up, opened the top drawer of my dresser, grabbed a booklet and tossed it to Bree. Start studying, I said. You can get your learner's permit in 3 months. Bree squealed with delight. Thank you, Daddy. My daughters were growing up and had just learned an important life lesson. I was very proud of them. Mom asked the girls what they wanted for supper, and they chose mac and cheese. We had a delightful meal with pork chops and baked beans. After supper, still weak and recovering, I went to bed early. Around midnight, Bea crawled into bed with me. As I cuddled her, I couldn't help thinking that Sarah would have twisted this innocent moment into something inappropriate. On Monday, Carl brought me a proposal for the bankruptcy court that needed my signature. If approved, it would double our company's size. Carl and I reviewed and signed it. Joanne sent it to the state capitol by courier. I informed Joanne her salary was now $70,000 annually, effective immediately. Later, Joanne closed my office door for a private conversation. "David wants you to know what's going on," she said. "You have my attention," I replied. "The images on your brother's computer are of local girls," Joanne explained. "David suspects it's a trophy list of girls Mark took advantage of, including Sarah. This can be used in your divorce to question his motives for wanting Sarah to move in, implying he sought access to your daughters." "I'm not surprised," I said. "Workers have mentioned Mark's pictures of conquests. He was 23 when he was with Sarah at 17, legally statutory assault. This pattern will help in my divorce, but we need to figure out how to use it." "David will prepare an internal report," Joanne said. "It will be up to the district attorney to decide on the charges. David will bring a copy home for you." "Sounds good. Tell David I owe him one," I said. "David was overwhelmed by your generosity," Joanne said. "Mary has also been rewarded with a promotion to junior management. Connie's husband, Tom, is joining as CFO. We need to find a qualified assistant within our staff. Once we pick her, we'll discuss her new responsibilities and use Mark's former office furniture for her setup." "Why?" "If we double our size soon and go statewide, there will be days when management is tied up or out of the office," I explained. "You and Mary, as executive assistants, will need to make decisions on our behalf once fully trained. You need to ensure you can trust the new assistant, like you trust us," she said. "Any issues with Mary and the new assistant will be your responsibility. If you need advice, you can always ask me," I said. Joanne left with a proud look. When I left for the day, Mary and Joanne were deep in discussion. "Carl told me, the new structure is brilliant. We're planning for the new openings if our offer is accepted. Human Resources is compiling a list for relocation and promotion. Good thing I included a 30-day notice before acceptance to prepare," I said. "Connie's husband Tom is joining as CFO. Without his financing arrangements, we couldn't have done this. Mark will be contacted about buying out his shares this week." "Anything happening on the divorce end?" Carl asked. "We have a court hearing this week for the blood tests," I said. "We were the last case called before Judge Donald McDonald that Friday. Contrary to his reputation, the judge wasn't tall or broad. He stood about 5 feet 10 inches and weighed around 180 pounds, appearing to be in his late 50s. My lawyer explained the relationship between Sarah, Mark, and me, detailing how Sarah and I had reconnected and how I discovered her affair with my brother. She presented an affidavit from my mother stating Sarah admitted the affair had been ongoing for 2 years and played a video recording from David, which caught the judge's interest. I explained what happened the day Sarah accused me of kidnapping my children. The judge looked increasingly concerned. Sarah's lawyer tried to counter our claims but struggled. The judge finally spoke. "There's enough evidence to suggest an ongoing affair between Sarah and Mark Tate, implying one brother may have tried to pass off his parentage on the other. A DNA test is the only way to determine the children's true parentage." The judge continued, "Mark Tate's disclosures to the police and his behavior are crucial to this case. The divorce is granted to Caleb Tate on the grounds of infidelity." Sarah was devastated, her head hanging low, while Mark glared at me with barely contained rage. The judge implied they had been manipulating me for years, a comment that stung even though it was true. As we exited the courtroom, I noticed Sarah's parents and her older brother, Ted, preparing to leave. They looked pained. When Sarah tried to approach them, they turned their backs, shunning her, a reaction I knew stemmed from their strong religious views. I approached Sarah, my lawyer by my side. Sarah, you must be proud, you've destroyed 2 families in less than a month, I said, my tone cutting. Bea and Bree are doing well, by the way. As I walked away, Sarah started crying. Outside, her family was waiting for me. Mom, Dad, do you want the girls for the weekend? I asked. Mom hugged me. We'd love to. Ted extended his hand. Good to see you, old friend. If your daughters don't wear me out tomorrow, let's go out for a late supper and a few beers. I'm coming home for good. 20 years is enough, I'm here to house hunt and find a job. My phone rang, it was Joanne. The 30-day countdown is on, she said excitedly. Thanks. Let Carl know I found the head for our resource department, if I can convince him to join us, I said. How did it go in divorce court? Joanne asked. I'll explain when I get back, I replied, turning to Ted. How about starting at $60,000 a year? After 6 months, you could be head of Parish's new resource department. Interested? What's involved? Ted asked. Managing purchasing, distribution, and inventory for 3 hubs, I explained. Supplies for retail stores and commercial sites will be delivered from these hubs. Of course, I'll take it, Ted said, smiling. James, Sarah's dad interjected, show him your house. If he's interested, I'll cover his down payment. Ted and his wife decided to make an offer on the house at full price. I accepted, and all that remained was Sarah's signature. Ted was amazed at how easily they could start over. I stopped at a wine shop and picked up 2 bottles of wine, cheese, and crackers before heading back to the office. The upper management team had a small celebration before calling it a night. Later, my daughters called to ask if they could go with their grandparents for the weekend. I pretended to be surprised but said, go ahead and have fun. When I returned to my mother's house, I told her about my day. Ted is getting a great deal on the house. The items you're including are worth more than they're paying. Ted's family will be well set up, no matter what Sarah did. Ted will be diligent, Mom said. You always take the high road. Your father would be proud, just as I am. Thank you, Mom. It means a lot, especially since I'm still hurting, because I still love her, I admitted. By the way, Mark sold his shares to me for $5 million through my lawyer. So I guess I'm staying on the board. What motivated him? I asked. He said he was never happy in the industry and only stayed because it was family-owned. They're moving to Florida to develop property he owns there, Mom explained. I smiled, knowing our business was now worth over $40 million, according to Tom's report. We had secured $15 million in funding, spending $10 million to buy assets and contracts up north for pennies on the dollar. Tom believed we could recoup close to $7 million after streamlining operations. We planned to rebrand the fleet and use local contractors, incentivizing them with a 10% Christmas bonus tax-free, a strategy that had always improved customer satisfaction. Mom dragged me to a community fundraiser for a family raising money for their daughter's cancer treatment. There, I met Dr. Tamara Braden, their physician. I wasn't looking for anyone, but she caught my eye. I called our accountant and arranged a $50,000 donation to cover the family's medical bills. When I presented the paid-in-full receipt to the family, Tamara whispered, "I'm so impressed. I'm taking you home for dinner." I laughed. "Then you'll have to drive me home because I came with my mother." She laughed back. "You can't be serious." "That's my mother, Ruth, over there," I said, pointing. "Ruth Parrish? She's one of our greatest contributors," Tamara exclaimed. "I didn't know the company was named after her." Tamara smiled and asked, "What was wrong with the woman divorcing you?" "She got involved with a man with no morals." "It's sad because they're both going down," I replied. Just then, Ted's wife approached us. "Tamara, if you need me to start early, I can." "I'm not going back with Ted," the kids and I are staying. James, what are you doing here? Jackie asked. I was just talking to Tamara, I said. My mother's over there watching me. How do you know James? Tamara asked Jackie. He's divorcing my sister-in-law and will be Ted's new boss. He gave us a great deal on his old house, Jackie said. Why? Tamara asked. No matter what Ted's sister did, Ted is family, I said. If you need any furniture, I have some you can have. Ted's parents bought the kids' bedroom furniture this morning, Jackie replied. After the sale was confirmed and Sarah signed the agreement, Ted and I let the ladies talk and walked off. Sarah is really struggling with depression, Ted said. I told her she did it to herself, but everyone else is hurting too, even your daughters. No one understands why you did it, not even you. She doesn't know it's going to get worse for her before it gets better, I said. Mark's past behavior is about to become very public. Take it easy with Tamara, Ted advised. She's a beautiful woman and is hurting as much as you. She's always been a keeper. Tamara took my hand and said, let's go. I promised you dinner, and we need to shop for a few things. Mom watched us leave with a knowing smile. Tamara handed me the keys and asked me to drive to Food City, a small grocery store known for its meat selection. You can wait in the car if you want, she offered. I'll go in with you, I said. What's on the menu? Steak, salad, and dessert, if you have room, Tamara replied. Sounds good, I said. Let's grab a couple of bottles of red wine to go with it. It was after midnight when I got home. Tamara and I had a wonderful evening and planned to meet again the following Saturday. I had the best night's sleep I'd had since Sarah left. Sunday, family and reflections. Mom dragged me to church on Sunday, where Connie informed me she'd found a house and put in an offer. I told her to submit the purchase agreement to accounting for the check. Meanwhile, Bea and Bree met their mother for lunch at the mall. Later, they told me it hadn't gone well. She was upset, Bea said. We told her you'd met someone who's helping you heal. Bree added, and we told her what we found on Uncle Mark's computer. It was the first time Sarah had heard about the files, and she was devastated. Knowing she'd lost her chance for sole custody of our daughters, Sarah became visibly depressed, according to the girls. Mark's legal troubles. Meanwhile, the district attorney filed multiple charges of statutory assault against Mark. He informed the parents of Mark's previous victims that Mark had moved in with a woman who had 2 minor daughters. Most of the parents agreed to press charges to protect those girls. Mark was arrested the next day at home, in front of Sarah. She realized she would never gain custody of Bea and Bree, and her lawyer's original warnings in the divorce petition had become her reality, not mine. 2 months after meeting Tamara, Mark was out on bail. Sarah and I finalized our divorce. She received $4 million but no shares in the company. DNA tests confirmed Bea and Bree were my biological daughters, and I was awarded sole custody. Sarah was granted liberal visitation rights, as long as Mark wasn't present. During mediation, I pointed out that Mark might have wanted Sarah to move in to gain access to my daughters. Hearing this broke Sarah completely. The money I gave her would allow her to live comfortably if invested properly, and I provided the names of 2 investment advisors. Moving on. After the divorce was finalized, Connie and Tom moved back with their 5 kids. Mom was delighted to have them close, saying, "My life is filled with more love now than I've lost." She was right. Connie remained CEO, and Ted flourished in his new role. Mark's reputation was destroyed, and even his closest friends turned against him. His legal bills were mounting. The girls believed their mother would eventually leave Mark. They were still concerned about her depression, though. Business thrives. The takeover of the northern contracts was progressing well. We caught up on work delayed by the bankruptcy and were ahead of schedule. Most contracts ended up costing less than agreed, and we decided to rebate 10% after final payments were received. We reduced labor costs by 50%. On a site visit, I reviewed the new buildings and streamlined operations. Excess properties were put up for sale at appraised value. Ted's first major purchase cut costs per item by 20%, thanks to increased volume and skilled negotiations. He reorganized our approach, significantly reducing handling costs, proving he was the right choice for the role. Tamara and new beginnings. Mom and I prepared for a barbecue where Tamara would meet the family for the first time. I picked her up early so she could meet Bea and Bree beforehand. Tamara looked stunning in a white dress with monarch butterfly embroidery. After introductions, Bea said, "If you're my dad's girlfriend, he picked a good one." Tamara admitted she was as nervous as I was. The party was a success, and Tamara fit in quickly. Ted noticed and said, "Looks like you two are falling in love. Let's go dancing at Bias later." I agreed. David later informed me that the DA believed Mark would get at least 7 years due to the number of parents standing against him. "Joanne thinks Tamara is great for you but worries you'll mess it up," David said. "Why do women always think it's the man's fault?" I joked. By the pool, Tamara noticed my discomfort with my daughter's swimsuits. "You're old-fashioned," she said. "Was your father like that?" "Yes," I replied. "He wanted us to be our best and believed actions spoke louder than words. Sadly, that's what drove Sarah away." "If my first husband was like you, we'd still be married," Tamara said, and we shared a kiss. "Cool it, Dad," Bree teased. "She's not our new mom yet." I laughed and jumped into the pool to play with the girls while Tamara watched. Later, the girls took pictures and sent them to their mother, showing how serious Tamara and I were. A new chapter. The next day, Tamara and I shopped before joining the family for dinner. Bea texted, "Where are you?" "We're waiting." When we arrived, Bea said, "You've got some explaining to do, Dad." I grinned, which caught my sister and mother's attention. I asked for champagne and glasses for everyone. Tamara smiled nervously as I announced, "Tamara and I got engaged this afternoon." The room erupted in joy. Bree sent a video to her mom, who later took an overdose of sleeping pills and never woke up. Mark and Sarah blamed each other for their problems, realizing their relationship was based on lust, not love. Her self-destruction hit everyone hard. At Sarah's grave, Mark said, "I'm sorry for everything." "I don't believe you," I replied and walked away. That night, Mark drank most of a bottle of Jack Daniels and used his first weapon to end his life, leaving a note that read, "I'm sorry. Success and joy." A week before Labor Day, Carl, Tom, Mary, Joanne, and Lucy came into my office with cake and champagne. "What's the celebration for?" I asked. "We paid off the loan in full," Tom said. "We're debt-free." "Thank God," I said. "I never want another 6 months like the last." "It wasn't all bad," Tom said. "I'm looking forward to being your best man in 8 days. But I never want to hear you say, we had to get married." Everyone laughed, knowing tomorrow was 2 months along.